The storm came faster than expected. I stood in the midst of the howling wind, my heart heavy with unease, feeling that something was terribly wrong. In the distance, I heard a low rumble, the wind howling like some kind of monster, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I had to be sure that he was still alive. The Sterling Ranch had always been the place where I felt the most peaceful. Though I'd once been just an unknown girl, no one noticing me, I'd slowly become a part of it. A small, yet meaningful part. Today, I wasn't just a servant, I was its protector. And Jake, he was the only reason I couldn't leave, no matter how fierce the storm outside might be. I rushed outside, my eyes never leaving the house's swaying roof. The wind howled so violently that I had to grip the door tightly to keep from being swept away. Jake was in the barn, near the animals we'd cared for together. One of the cows had fallen ill, and I knew he was worried about it. But when I rushed inside, searching for him, I found nothing but darkness and eerie silence. The wind suddenly grew stronger. The sound of flying debris filled the air, and then there was a loud bang. I collapsed to the ground. A massive explosion erupted, and blinding light from the ensuing fire consumed the surroundings. "Jake," I screamed, my throat tightening. I couldn't see him. I could only hear my own breath mixed with the crackling of the fire, swallowing everything around me. I ran into the barn, a single thought in my mind. He had to be alive. My steps were clumsy, but my heart wouldn't let me stop. The storm was just the beginning of what I was about to face. A heavy blow of fate was fast approaching. When I found him, I could hardly believe my eyes. Jake was lying there, blood flowing from a wound on his shoulder, his face as pale as someone on the brink of death. I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I tried to stop the bleeding. I knew that if I didn't act now, he wouldn't make it. "Clara." He whispered my name, his voice weak but still filled with concern, as though he was more worried about me than himself. "Don't say anything, Jake," I whispered back, my voice tight with emotion. "You're going to be fine. I won't let you go." His gaze met mine, but it wasn't the same as before. His eyes gleamed strangely, as if he was trying to say something he couldn't. And then I realized, he wasn't just afraid of dying, he was afraid for me. The only reason he didn't want to die was because of me. The only reason he could endure this pain was because of me. We didn't speak anymore. Only the sound of his labored breathing and the crackling of the fire raging outside. The storm had passed, but its consequences were just beginning. After getting Jake inside the house, I heard footsteps approaching rapidly. The ranch hands came running, their eyes full of worry, not daring to ask what was happening. But I knew they had realized that it wasn't just a natural storm that had destroyed everything. This storm carried a dark conspiracy. It wasn't just an accident. The storm had changed everything. But I couldn't let it change the love I had for Jake. However, I knew one thing. What was to come wouldn't just be a battle against nature. It was also going to be a fight against enemies I hadn't even begun to imagine. The memories of meeting Jake for the first time always come to me clearly, like a perfect painting. Even though at that time, I was just a simple country girl, with nothing but my hands and a fragile heart. Jake saved me from the hunters who attacked my family. Back then, I was just swept along by the storm of life, not knowing where I was going or where I would end up. But Jake, he was the only light in my dark world. He didn't say much, just took me away, protected me, and in his arms, I felt like everything would be okay. Now, I realized that our love was not just about salvation, but also about sacrifice. That didn't just come from me, but from him as well. That evening, as I was lost in my thoughts about the past, I heard gunshots from a distance. I didn't need to think much. I had become accustomed to this life. Jake and I had faced many challenges together, but this time, I felt something was different. The shots grew louder. My eyes never left him as he stood tall on the cliff, protecting me and everything we had built. Jake's gaze was everything I needed, and I knew that we would get through this. But I also knew one thing more clearly than ever. Our love would be tested, and nothing would be easy. Jake and I decided to leave the ranch, though my heart was heavy with questions unanswered. A carriage was to take us to the nearest doctor, where they could treat Jake's remaining wounds. The rain still fell relentlessly, and the sound of the wheels rolling over the dry trail only intensified my unease. Suddenly, the carriage overturned, throwing me out onto the ground. Rocks and debris slammed into my body, causing pain so sharp that I couldn't move. Without hesitation, Jake rushed toward me, his eyes filled with panic and confusion. "Clara," he shouted, his voice desperate. But when he saw me lying motionless, his face turned pale. "Are you okay? Say something, Clara." I struggled to open my eyes, feeling like 1,000 needles were piercing my body. I don't know." My voice was weak, but I still tried to smile. Jake wasted no time. He quickly lifted me in his arms, his grip firm but gentle. "Don't worry, you'll be fine." Although those words were meant to reassure, I felt his fear. He couldn't lose me. On the way back, when the rain had finally ceased and the wind had died down, I couldn't keep it inside anymore. My love for Jake had only grown, but I knew there was something between us, an invisible distance. I didn't know much about his past, about the things that had shaped him into the man he was today. He always kept it hidden, and I felt that if I didn't understand him, our love would never be complete. As we sat under the dim light of an oil lamp, I gazed into his eyes, the silence stretching between us. I gently asked again, but this time, I wasn't just curious. I needed to know, because I couldn't live with uncertainty anymore. "Jake, tell me about your family, about your loved ones." He turned away, his hand tightening around the reins, and I knew he was battling something inside. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, but filled with anguish. "I lost my mother and sister in an attack. They didn't survive the war, and I couldn't save them." His words hit me like a hammer. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to ease his pain, but I understood that his story wasn't just about loss. It was a wound that would never heal, and one I couldn't fix completely. One day, as we were returning to the ranch, we unexpectedly came across a group of strange men. Their cold eyes and twisted smiles made me feel something was terribly off. One of them, a man with a long scar across his face, grinned. "We've caught the big fish, Jake Sterling." He sneered. My heart raced. I felt the danger surrounding us. This wasn't a random encounter. We had been watched for a long time. These men seemed to know all about Jake's past, and now they wanted revenge. Jake stood his ground, his hand resting on his gun. "What do you want?" Before the man could answer, I saw a familiar figure step out from the group, and everything inside me shattered. "Clayton," I gasped, recognizing the man standing before me. Clayton, my ex-lover. He wasn't just someone I once loved. He was the one who had made me feel abandoned. Now, he was the one behind this plot. Clayton laughed, his gaze dripping with disdain. "Clara, you really think you'll live happily with this man? He'll never protect you from what you deserve." Clayton's words were a challenge. Jake didn't say anything more, just sneered and pulled out his gun. This wasn't the first gunfight for these men, but this time, I couldn't just stand by. I had to do something. I slowly stepped back, pulling out my hunting rifle, silently aiming from a distance, taking out one of the men who was about to attack Jake. The gunshots rang through the night, cutting the silence of the Wild West. But what was scarier than the gunfight was the feeling that I could lose the man I loved. No, I couldn't let that happen. Our love had to survive everything, even if it meant losing everything. After everything settled, when the enemies had fled, Jake and I stood beneath the starry sky. No words were needed, only the twinkling stars above and the gentle wind. Moments like this, I felt as though time stood still. "Clara," Jake whispered, his hand softly caressing my hair. "Thank you for standing by me." I looked into his eyes, where there was light and warmth, and I realized that our love wasn't just surviving the trials. It was living through them. It was strength, it was rebirth, and it was fighting for each other. "I'll always be by your side, Jake, no matter what." After everything, we returned to the ranch. Things began to rebuild, from the ashes to the wounds deep in our hearts. Our love wasn't just about sweet moments. It was about resilience, about rebirth from loss, and about strength to stand up for each other. Jake and I stood on the threshold of our home, hand in hand, looking toward the long road ahead. We had survived it all, and I knew, with him, I could do anything. We would never give up. This love would carry us through every storm, and we would always stand strong, no matter how the world changed. The night was heavy with foreboding. The storm had passed, but its aftermath left a chilling silence that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I could still hear the faint crackle of burning wood and the unsettling moans of the wind as it howled across the prairie. But inside the house, with Jake by my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that something far darker was on the horizon. Jake lay in bed, propped up on pillows, his face pale but his eyes wide open, as if trying to absorb the silence around us. The storm had taken its toll on him, but the physical wounds were nothing compared to the pain buried deep within him. The wound on his shoulder had been treated, but I could see the turmoil in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched every time he thought I wasn't looking. I knew there was something he wasn't telling me, something he had buried for so long, that it was eating him alive from the inside out. I moved closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. He tensed for a moment, but then relaxed under my touch. "Jake," I whispered, my voice soft but persistent. "I need you to tell me, what's going on? What's haunting you?" He let out a long breath, the sound almost as heavy as the weight on his shoulders. Slowly, he looked at me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't quite decipher. "Clara, you don't understand. You can't." "Try me," I said, squeezing his hand. "I want to understand. I want to help you." His eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw a vulnerability I had never seen before. "Before I came here, I lost everything," he said, his voice raw. "My father, my brother, my whole family, they were killed in a raid, and I couldn't save them. I've been running ever since, trying to outrun the guilt. But I can't outrun the past, Clara. It follows me wherever I go." The words hung in the air like a heavy mist, and I could feel the weight of his grief settling between us. I didn't know how to respond. What could I say to make it better? But I knew one thing for sure. The man I loved had been carrying this burden alone for far too long. I didn't know how to take away his pain, but I knew that I wasn't going to let him carry this weight alone anymore. I wanted to say something, to ease his suffering, but I couldn't find the right words. I just squeezed his hand tighter, hoping it would be enough. He turned his head away, staring into the flickering light of the fire. Lost in the past, the silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as though we were both finding some small comfort in simply being in each other's presence, even when words failed us. The next morning, we packed up and prepared to leave for town. The nearest doctor was over 30 miles away, and Jake needed to be checked properly. But as we loaded the wagon, an unsettling feeling crept over me. Something felt off, like we were being watched. I couldn't quite place it, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. We set off, the road ahead bumpy and treacherous, but the carriage ride was the least of my concerns. Suddenly, without warning, the wagon hit a large rock hidden in the dirt road, sending it careening sideways. In an instant, everything went black as the vehicle flipped over, throwing me violently to the ground. Pain shot through my body, and I gasped for air as my vision blurred. I could barely move, but I heard Jake's voice calling out to me, frantic and desperate. "Clara!" His voice was like a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of unconsciousness. I forced my eyes open, and there he was, his face twisted in horror, rushing toward me. "Clara, please, are you okay? Stay with me, don't close your eyes." I could feel blood trickling down my leg where I had been injured. My body ached, and the world around me spun in dizzying circles. But there was no time for weakness. Jake had already reached me, lifting me into his arms with a strength that defied the situation. "We need to get you to the doctor, Clara, now." As he gently placed me on the wagon again, I caught a glimpse of the deep worry in his eyes. It wasn't just about the accident, it was about something deeper, something I didn't understand, but could feel. Jake was afraid, not for himself, but for me. As we continued on the road to town, the wind howled around us, carrying a strange sense of urgency. I looked at Jake, trying to read the turmoil on his face. My heart ached for him. His silence was louder than any words could be, and I needed to know the truth. I needed him to let me in. "Jake, please," I whispered. "I can see it in your eyes. Whatever it is, I need to know. I'm not leaving you. You don't have to carry this burden alone." He glanced at me, his expression hardening for a moment before it softened. "I don't want to drag you into this, Clara, but you deserve to know." And so, he told me. He told me about his family, about how they had been slaughtered in cold blood during a raid on their ranch, about how he had failed to save them, and how that failure had driven him to live a life of isolation and guilt. He had never allowed himself to mourn because he thought it was his fault. "I promised them I'd protect them," he said, his voice breaking, "but I wasn't fast enough. I couldn't even save my brother." I reached out and took his hand, my heart swelling with sorrow for him. I had no words that could take away his pain, but I knew that I wasn't going to let him carry this weight alone anymore. The storm had passed, but a new storm was on the horizon, one that would force us to face the demons of the past. As we neared the town, I began to sense something was wrong. A group of men on horseback appeared in the distance, blocking the road. They were too quiet, too still. My stomach tightened. Something about them felt dangerous. Jake slowed the wagon, but I could see his hand move instinctively to his gun. "Stay behind me," he murmured, his voice low and tense. The men approached, their eyes narrowing as they looked at Jake. I recognized one of them. The man with the scar on his face was one of the raiders from Jake's past. He hadn't forgotten what Jake had done, or rather, what Jake hadn't done. "Sterling," the man spat, his voice dripping with malice. "Thought you could escape your past, huh?" Jake's face remained impassive, but his grip tightened on the reins. "What do you want?" The man sneered. "You think you can run from what happened? Your family paid the price, but you still owe." The air between us was charged, and I could feel the tension building, the silence screaming louder than any words. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was the reckoning Jake had been running from. I saw him preparing for it, knowing that this battle could cost him everything. In a blur of motion, the guns came out. Jake fired first, his aim true and deadly. But the men didn't hesitate. A gunfight erupted, the sound of gunshots echoing through the air. My heart pounded in my chest as I saw Jake's skill with a gun, his focus unshakable. But I also saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing everything once again. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the rifle from the wagon and aimed carefully from the distance, taking out one of the men approaching from the flank. The crack of my shot echoed, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The men scattered, but the leader, the man with the scar, remained, glaring at Jake. "You can't run from this, Sterling," the man yelled, raising his gun. But before he could fire, Jake was faster. Another shot rang out, and the man fell to the ground. Jake stood over him, breathing heavily, his face set in stone. "I'm done running," he muttered, his voice cold. After the battle, we decided to take shelter at a local town celebration, hoping to blend in and avoid drawing attention. But I could feel the eyes on us. They watched us from across the room, whispers rising in the air like smoke. I wasn't ready for what came next. A man approached me, a face I recognized from my past. Clayton, the man I had once trusted, the man I thought I loved. But now, his intentions were clear. He was after something I had. Before I could react, he grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the back of the room. Jake's eyes locked onto us, his expression hardening, but Clayton had the upper hand. "Let go of me," I said, struggling against Clayton's grip. But he only smirked. "Don't act like you don't remember me, Clara." He pulled me into the shadows, where Jake couldn't see us. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel my heart racing. But then I saw it, the glint of steel in Clayton's hand. He was armed. My stomach dropped. "What are you planning, Clayton?" I demanded, trying to pull away. He laughed softly, the sound cold and cruel. "I know you, Clara. I know what you want. You'll be mine again, whether you like it or not." I struggled to break free, but Clayton's grip tightened. "Jake won't save you this time," he sneered. But just as I thought I was trapped, I saw Jake's silhouette in the doorway. He stepped into the room, his eyes blazing with fury. "Let her go," Jake growled, his voice low and dangerous. Clayton hesitated for a moment, then sneered. "This isn't over, Sterling." And with that, he stormed off. Jake rushed to my side, his hands shaking slightly as he touched my face. "Clara, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. I nodded. still shaken, but knowing that no matter what, Jake and I had each other, and that was enough. Later that night, as we sat by the fire, I took out a piece of paper and began writing. I couldn't keep my feelings bottled up any longer. I had to let my family know. The letter was simple, but it said everything. Jake Sterling is my family now, and I will stand by him, come what may. After finishing the letter, I folded it carefully and placed it in my bag, knowing that no matter where life took us, Jake would always be by my side. But little did I know, the challenges were far from over. There were secrets waiting to be uncovered, secrets that would shake our world to the core, and it was only just beginning.
I had lost everything.